Praise to you for your saving waters. We pray at the font. Noah and the animals survive the flood. Hagar discovers your well. The Israelites escape through the sea and they drink from your gushing rock. Naaman washes his leprosy away, and the Samaritan woman will never be thirsty again. Naaman, a character whose story I never remember hearing about in Sunday school or confirmation, gets named right there, along with such biblical epics as Noah's Ark and the Exodus. Naaman, a foreigner whose story closes out our brief arc through 1st and 2nd Kings, recounting the stories of Elijah and Elisha, the great prophets of Israel. And despite Naaman's notable absence from Sunday school classrooms, here is a story that appears to have been so embedded in the collective memory of the Israelites that even centuries later, when Jesus alludes to it in the synagogue at Nazareth, it's enough to fill the crowd with rage, drive him out of their town, and try to hurl him off a cliff. No prophet is accepted in his hometown, Jesus remarks, just before provoking them to murderous rage. But the truth is, there were many widows in Israel in the time of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, and there was a severe famine over all the land. Yet Elijah was sent to none of them except to a widow at Zarephath in Sidon, an outsider. There were also many with a skin disease in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman, the Syrian, another outsider. Why the intense rage? Well, the answer might lie, perhaps in part, in the other stories that our baptismal liturgy names alongside Naaman. Hagar, a slave to Sarai, Abram's wife, with whom Abram has a child when Sarai cannot, a source of such intense jealousy and tension that it drives Sarai, full of bitter resentment, to force Hagar and her son Ishmael away into the wilderness on their own. The Samaritan woman, forced to come draw water at high noon by herself, away from the scrutiny of her neighbors, unable to bear the shame thrust upon her because of her status in the community. And then Naaman, a commander of the Aramean army, a great man in high favor, a military hero among his people, a mighty warrior who is able to get on-demand audiences with kings and has servants subject to his command. This is clearly someone loaded with privilege. And yet, for all that privilege, this skin disease nearly negates all of that, threatening to undermine his standing. Hagar, a foreigner, a slave, and an outsider, discovers God's well and mercy in the wilderness. The Samaritan woman, an outcast among her own community and her Jewish kin, is given living water and will never be thirsty again. Naaman, a foreigner, a political enemy of Israel, and a leper, washes his disease away and his flesh is restored. God seems to have a knack for working with and through outsiders, a truth which Naaman's story underscores at every turn. It is the unnamed Israelite girl, a slave to Naaman's wife, who absolutely has no reason to help her captors, who first speaks up about this prophet capable of curing Naaman of his leprosy. So where does he go? Straight to the prophet that she mentions? Not quite. The convoluted chain of communication is almost comical. Naaman first goes to the king of Aram, his boss, who sends him to the king of Israel, his enemy, whose own ego and insecurity managed to somehow make this all about himself. Only then, after all of this, does Elisha the prophet, an outsider of his own kind, chime in. What are you doing? Why have you torn your clothes? Just bring him to me. Just like the girl said. But wait, there's more. When Naaman does finally get to Elisha, he's so turned off by the seemingly mundane solution to his ailment. Just go wash yourself in the Jordan River? Seriously, that's it? As if the means weren't good enough, so Naaman refuses to participate. Think about that. He would rather continue to suffer from his disease than take the word of a foreign prophet who tells him to wash in a dingy foreign river in order to be cured. For no other reason, it seems, than it's just not a grand enough solution. It finally takes the proactiveness of Naaman's servants to talk him down from his rage and reason with him. And when Naaman finally caves to their argument, sure enough, he's healed. Just like Elisha said. From a slave girl that no one listens to at first, to a prophet pitted against his own king, to servants who risk speaking up, this is a healing story that happens because of the outsiders. Naaman would have never found out about Elisha, this man capable of healing him, were it not for his wife's slave. And Naaman wouldn't have given Elisha a second thought were it not for the prodding of his own servants. These outsiders get it. They are the ones who drive the story forward and become catalysts of grace. Story after story in our scriptures, Naaman's included, reminds us of God's unending concern for those with whom the world is not concerned. Those whose voices are ignored are amplified. Those who are lowly are lifted up. Those who have been made to take the role of outsiders themselves become the locus of God's grace. Naaman's story, intertwining as it does with Elisha's story, and spilling over into the pages of the Gospels and those words of Jesus, reminds us of God's care and concern for those who have been cast aside, no matter who they are. It's a truth that reverberates in Paul's letter to the Galatians, urging the community not to grow weary in doing what is right, always working for the good of all, not only the insiders, but the outsiders too. This is a call to us as church today, and never has this call felt more pressing and more urgent than it does today. When millions of our fellow citizens are in danger of losing access to health care, food stamps, and other vital social services, when already vulnerable immigrant and refugee communities and families live in daily fear of being abruptly separated from their loved ones. O God, we pray in our prayer of the day, you have taught us to keep all your commandments by loving you and our neighbor. And who is my neighbor? One writer posting on social media this week puts it this way: I was hungry and you cut SNAP. I was thirsty and you cut funding to ensure clean drinking water. I was sick and you cut Medicaid. I was a stranger and you deported me. I was in prison and you just left me there to rot. Whatever you do to the least of these, you do unto me. As a church, we face this and every moment together with resolve, Presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton reminds us, rooted in our trust in God to work for the good of all. In the midst of grief, God is our comfort. In the face of uncertainty, God is our rock. In the grip of all that is fearful, God is our hope. And trusting in God who is faithful, our call as church persists to love our neighbor, our hungry neighbor, our thirsty neighbor, our sick neighbor, our immigrant neighbor, our outsider neighbor. For that is where God is.